What would you do if something 7 feet tall approached your truck at 2 a.m. on a dark exit ramp? Tonight's witness found out. He's a long-haul driver who came face-to-face with a Sasquatch at 3 feet away. Close enough to see curiosity in its eyes. Close enough to feel the ground shake when it ran. I'm your host, Damon Blackwood, and this is Jim's story. There's a rule among long-haul truck drivers that nobody talks about. If you pull over on a dark road and something doesn't feel right, you don't investigate. You don't look around with your flashlight. You don't try to figure out what's making that sound in the woods. You get back in the cab, lock the doors, and you drive. Jim learned this rule the hard way. Twice. Jim's a long-haul driver now, but he spent years in law enforcement before that. State Patrol, then County Sheriff's Office. He's seen fatal car accidents with bodies twisted in ways that don't make sense. Victims extracted from crushed metal with the jaws of life. He's been in shootouts where rounds were coming through his windshield. He's dealt with the absolute worst humanity has to offer. Domestic violence calls that turned into hostage situations. Drug busts that went sideways. Pursuit chases at speeds that should have killed everyone involved. But he'll tell you straight up, he'd rather face any of that again than spend another 3 seconds with what he encountered on 2 separate nights, years apart, when something from the wilderness decided his truck looked interesting. The first time he thought he'd been rear-ended. The second time he was close enough to see the pores in its skin. This is the story of when Sasquatch stopped the truck. Make sure to like and subscribe. Before we get into what happened, you need to understand who Jim is, because witness credibility matters. When someone tells you they saw something impossible, the first question is always, what kind of person are they? Jim's the kind of guy who doesn't rattle easy. 6'3", former military before law enforcement, grew up hunting and fishing in Oklahoma. He knows the difference between a deer and a bear, between a person and a trick of the light. He's been trained in observation. License plates, suspect descriptions, crime scene details. His job for years was to notice things other people miss. And after law enforcement, he transitioned to long-haul trucking. 18-wheelers hauling refrigerated freight coast to coast. The kind of work where you're alone for days at a time, driving through the night when America is asleep, pulling into rest stops and way stations in places most people have never heard of. You spend enough time on the road, you see things. Wildlife crossing highways in the pre-dawn darkness. Fog that turns familiar routes into alien landscapes. The way empty stretches of interstate can feel like another planet at 3 a.m. when you haven't seen another vehicle in an hour. But what Jim encountered wasn't wildlife, wasn't fog playing tricks, wasn't exhaustion or highway hypnosis. It was something else entirely. And it happened the first time in a place you wouldn't expect. Not deep wilderness. Not a remote mountain pass, right outside his hometown, a place he describes as a modern-day Mayberry. The first encounter happened in Oklahoma, about 1.5 miles from Jim's house. Now you need to understand something about where Jim lives. It's a small town, population maybe 3,000 on a good day. The kind of place where Friday night football is the biggest event of the week. Where everyone knows everyone, where you can leave your doors unlocked and nobody thinks twice about it. Main Street has a hardware store that's been there since 1952, a diner that serves breakfast all day, a single stoplight that most locals treat as optional after 9 p.m. It's quiet, safe, the kind of place people move to specifically to get away from the chaos of the world, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. It was late evening. Jim estimates around 10:30, maybe 11 p.m., when his wife came to him with a problem that, in that moment, seemed like the most pressing crisis in the world. Their little chihuahua, barely bigger than a loaf of bread, all of 5 pounds soaking wet. She'd gone into heat and managed to escape when Jim's wife opened the door to grab a package off the porch. The dog had bolted into the darkness, and in a small Oklahoma town, darkness means darkness. No streetlights on every corner, no ambient city glow, just deep, rural night. And Jim's wife was attached to that animal in a way that made one thing very clear. If anything happened to that dog, Jim was a dead man. So with that pleasant thought motivating him, Jim grabbed his keys and went looking. He drove around the neighborhood first, called the dog's name out the window. Nothing. Then expanded his search radius to the school, the park, the football field on the edge of town. The football field backs up to a small wooded area, maybe 5 or 6 acres, nothing substantial, just a patch of trees and brush between the field and the next residential development. The kind of forgotten space that exists in every small town. Not wilderness, not really even woods, just the margin. And that's where the search led him. There's a narrow paved road that runs along the back side of that football field. 1 lane, barely wide enough for a single car. It's the kind of road that was probably built in the 1960s when the school was first constructed and hasn't been updated since. Cracked asphalt, no shoulder to speak of, trees and brush pressing in from both sides. Jim pulled his truck onto that road, driving slowly, windows down, calling for the dog. Nothing. The nearest house was 2, maybe 3 blocks away. At that hour, everyone was asleep. No lights in windows. No sound except the insects and the distant hum of the highway a mile off. Jim pulled over on what passed for a shoulder, really just gravel and weeds, and got out of his truck. And, well, nature called, as it does. So Jim stepped a few feet from his truck, faced the tree line, and handled what needed handling. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get in small-town America when everyone's asleep and the world feels like it's holding its breath. Jim could hear the usual night sounds, crickets chirping in steady rhythm, a rustling in the brush that he figured was a squirrel or a possum, maybe a raccoon. The kind of sounds that are so normal you stop noticing them after a minute. Then he noticed something else. A smell. Not overwhelming at first, just a skunk. Had to be. That distinctive musky odor, like something had sprayed nearby. The defensive secretion that makes you want to be anywhere else, that clings to the air and makes your eyes water if you're close enough. Jim figured he didn't want to deal with a skunk encounter in the middle of the night. Last thing he needed was getting sprayed, having to bathe in tomato juice, explaining to his wife why he came home reeking like he'd been attacked by roadkill. So he zipped up, turned back toward his truck, and opened the door. That's when it happened. Jim's hand hadn't even reached the gear shifter. He was halfway into the cab, 1 foot on the running board, 1 hand on the door frame, about to pull himself in and get the hell away from whatever skunk was lurking in those bushes. And the back of his truck lurched forward. Not a gentle bump, not a nudge. It felt like he'd just been rear-ended at low speed. The whole truck scooted forward a few inches, the suspension compressing and rebounding. Jim felt it in his chest, that sudden jolt that makes your heart jump before your brain has time to process what's happening. His first thought was car accident. Someone had hit him. Some teenager texting, not paying attention, nosed into his bumper at 5 miles an hour. But that didn't make sense. There was no sound of an engine, no headlights. The road behind him had been empty when he pulled over. Maybe an ATV? Jim's second thought. Kids out joyriding on a 4-wheeler, came around the bend too fast, didn't see his truck parked there, bumped his rear bumper. Jim looked up at his rearview mirror, expecting to see a confused teenager or an embarrassed neighbor backing away, ready to apologize. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. A silhouette, standing upright. In the red glow of his taillights, maybe 8 to 10 feet behind his truck, a massive figure. Easily 6.5, maybe 7 feet tall. Broad shoulders, inhumanly broad, like a linebacker who'd been scaled up by 50%. Arms hanging long, just standing there. Jim stared at it in the mirror. His brain was trying to make sense of what he was seeing, cycling through explanations. Tall guy, really tall guy. Basketball player out for a walk. Except, who walks behind parked trucks on dark roads at 11 p.m.? The figure wasn't moving, wasn't backing away like someone who'd accidentally bumped a vehicle, wasn't approaching to apologize or check for damage. It was just standing there, watching him. Jim describes what he saw as looking like an NFL lineman in a fur coat. That was the closest comparison his mind could make in that moment. The build, the proportions, humanish, but wrong. Too big, too broad. The way it stood, perfectly still, wasn't how people stand. And then it screamed. Not a yell, not a shout. A scream. High-pitched, piercing, the kind of sound that isn't supposed to come from something that size. It echoed off the trees, cut through the quiet night like a blade. Not human, not quite animal. Something other. Jim had been in law enforcement for years. He'd heard screams before, victims, suspects, the sounds people make when they're terrified or angry or hurt. This wasn't that. This was a warning. The sound bypassed his brain and went straight to the oldest part of his nervous system, the part that knows, instinctively, when something wants you gone, when you're not welcome, when you've stumbled into territory that isn't yours. Jim didn't think, didn't process, didn't try to rationalize. He slammed the truck into gear and got out of there, tires throwing gravel, the engine roaring as he accelerated away from whatever had just bumped his vehicle and screamed at him. His hands were shaking on the wheel, heart pounding, that hollow feeling in his chest that comes with adrenaline dump. By the time he reached the stop sign at the end of that narrow road, Jim was doing almost 40 miles an hour on a street where 25 was pushing it. He didn't stop at the stop sign. He rolled through it, hands still trembling, eyes flicking to his mirrors, expecting to see something chasing him. Nothing. Just empty road, darkness, the fading glow of the football field lights in the distance. Jim drove home, parked in his driveway, and sat in the truck for a full 5 minutes trying to steady his breathing. His wife's chihuahua showed up the next morning, pregnant, but that's another story. The question was, what the hell had just happened? When Jim got home, his wife was waiting up. Asked if he'd found the dog. Jim told her no, still shaken, trying to keep his voice steady. His wife went to bed worried about the dog. Jim didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the first person he told was his mother. Now, Jim's mother is a listener of Sasquatch Chronicles, has been for years. She's heard hundreds of encounters, read the books, watched the documentaries, knows the patterns. She's what you might call well-versed in the subject. When Jim told her what happened, the bump, the silhouette, the scream, she didn't laugh. Didn't tell him it was his imagination. Didn't suggest he'd been tired or had mistaken a person for something else. She took it seriously. Almost too seriously. Within an hour, she'd handed him a stack of books, encounter reports, research papers, printouts from websites dedicated to Bigfoot sightings. She gave him the contact information for witness hotlines, research groups, people who study this phenomenon. Jim said it felt like she just diagnosed him with a terminal illness and was handing him reading material to help him cope. But here's the thing. She believed him, immediately, without question, because she'd heard stories like his before, dozens of them, hundreds. People who'd had encounters in places they shouldn't, residential neighborhoods, city parks, the margins between civilization and wilderness, places where these things aren't supposed to exist. Jim started listening to encounter reports, started reading, and the more he learned, the more his experience made sense in a way that was deeply uncomfortable. Because Jim had been in law enforcement, he dealt with dangerous situations, armed suspects, high-speed chases, domestic violence calls where everyone involved was armed and drunk. The kind of scenarios where you rely on training and experience and your weapon to keep you alive. But nothing in his training covered what to do when something bumps your truck and screams at you in the dark. That encounter stayed with him, changed how he thought about the woods behind the football field, changed how he thought about those small patches of trees between neighborhoods that most people never think twice about. It's easy to assume these things only exist in deep wilderness, national forests, mountain ranges, miles from civilization. Jim learned different. They're in the margins, the forgotten spaces, the patches of trees behind the ballpark where nobody goes after dark, the wooded lot behind the subdivision, the creek bed between the highway and the residential area. But Jim's first encounter, as unnerving as it was, happened at a distance. A silhouette in the taillights, a scream in the dark. Terrifying, yes, but he didn't get a good look, didn't see details. Could still, if he tried hard enough, tell himself it might have been something else. The second encounter? The second encounter left no room for doubt. By the time the second encounter happened, several years had passed. Jim had left law enforcement and gotten his CDL, commercial driver's license. He'd become a long-haul truck driver, specializing in refrigerated freight. It's a different kind of life. Weeks on the road, sleeping in the cab of your truck in rest areas and truck stops scattered across the country. Your entire world shrinks down to the view through your windshield, the CB radio chatter, and the hum of diesel engines. You get to know America in a way most people don't. Not the tourist spots, not the cities, but the infrastructure. The truck stops at 3 a.m., the way stations, the rest areas with their flickering fluorescent lights and vending machines, the exit ramps that lead to nowhere, just a single gas station and miles of farmland. It's lonely work, isolating. You can go days without a real conversation, just quick exchanges with dispatchers and dock workers. Your companions are audiobooks, podcasts, and whatever thoughts loop in your head as you watch the white lines disappear under your hood, mile after mile after mile. But it's also strangely peaceful. There's a rhythm to it, a meditative quality to the long stretches of highway. And at night, when you're hauling through the Midwest or the South, the darkness pressing against your windows, stars visible in ways they never are in cities. There's a kind of beauty to it. Jim had been driving for about 3 years when the second encounter happened. He knew the routes, knew which rest stops were safe and well lit, and which ones felt wrong. Knew which exit ramps to avoid because the lighting was poor or the area gave him a bad feeling. But sometimes, you don't have a choice. It was a run from Georgia to Illinois. Refrigerated freight, the kind that has to stay cold or the whole load spoils and you're liable for thousands of dollars in damages. Jim was hauling for a major grocery chain, which meant strict temperature monitoring. Sensors in the trailer, real-time reporting back to dispatch. He was northbound on Interstate 65 in Indiana, middle of the night, around 1:30, maybe 2 a.m. The kind of hour when the highway is yours. You might see another truck every 15 minutes, a car every 30. Otherwise, it's just you and the darkness and the endless white lines. Jim's onboard computer started pinging. Alert sounds, messages piling up from dispatch. At first, he ignored them. You can't read messages while driving. That's illegal and stupid, and a good way to end up in a ditch. But the pinging kept going, insistent. So at the next mile marker, Jim glanced at his tablet. Temperature alert. His refrigeration unit was showing out of range. According to the sensors, the trailer was running 2 degrees warmer than specification. 2 degrees might not sound like much, but with refrigerated freight, it's everything. 2 degrees over for an extended period means spoilage, means the load gets rejected at destination, means you're on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars. Dispatch called, asked if he could pull over and check the unit, run diagnostics, make sure it wasn't a sensor malfunction. Jim said sure. He'd done this 1,000 times. Refrigeration units glitch. Sensors throw false readings. 9 times out of 10, you pull over, check the panel, reset the system, and you're fine. So Jim watched for an exit. He was in rural Indiana, farmland. Not many options. But he found an exit ramp. Didn't even have a gas station, just a rural road that crossed the interstate, and he pulled off onto the shoulder. Killed the engine, grabbed his flashlight, climbed out of the cab. All around him, nothing. Flat Indiana countryside. Cornfields stretching to the horizon, bare after harvest. No lights except the distant glow of a farmhouse maybe 2 miles off. No sound except the wind and the crickets and the occasional distant truck on the interstate behind him. Total isolation. Jim walked back to his trailer. The refrigeration unit sits on the front of the trailer, right behind the cab. It's a diesel-powered machine, basically a self-contained engine and compressor that runs independently from the truck itself. Keeps the trailer cold no matter what. Jim had done this check hundreds of times. Flip open the control panel, read the temperature gauges, check for error codes, make sure the compressor is cycling properly. Usually takes 5 minutes tops. He opened the panel. Everything looked fine. Temperature was good, 34 degrees Fahrenheit, right where it should be. No error codes. The compressor was running smoothly. False alarm, probably a sensor glitch. Jim made a mental note to have it checked at the next maintenance stop, but it wasn't urgent. He was about to close the panel when he noticed something. A smell. Not the normal diesel exhaust smell from the unit. Not the chemical refrigerant smell. Something else. Musky. Thick. Like stale urine mixed with a skunky edge. The kind of smell that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up because it's wrong. Biological, but not any animal you're familiar with. Jim straightened up, suddenly very aware that he was alone on a dark exit ramp in the middle of nowhere. And then he heard it. Breathing. Not his own. Something else. Close. Very close. Just on the other side of his truck, past the frame rails, in the darkness beyond his LED work lights. Deep, steady breaths. The kind that move a lot of air. The kind that come from something big. Jim's training kicked in. His law enforcement instincts. When you're a cop and you hear something that doesn't belong, you investigate. You don't run. You assess the threat. You establish control of the situation. But Jim wasn't a cop anymore. And every instinct was suddenly screaming at him that this wasn't a situation he wanted to control. Still, he needed to see. Needed to know. He reached into the side box on the back of his cab, storage compartment, and flipped the toggle switch for his LED work lights. The lights came on, and there it was. Less than 3 feet away from him. A Sasquatch. 7 feet tall, standing right over his drive tires, between his rear cab and the front of his trailer. Its head was poked in between the gap, and it was just looking at him. Jim's 6'3". He's not a small guy. Most people have to look up to talk to him. He was looking up at this thing. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jim was frozen, partly from shock, partly from the very rational calculation that at this distance, if this thing wanted to hurt him, there was nothing he could do. It could reach across the deck of the truck and pluck him up like a child grabbing a doll. But it didn't. It just stood there, breathing, watching him with an expression that Jim can only describe as curious. The head was oblong, not quite human, not quite ape, something in between. The skull shape was more elongated than a person's, with a prominent brow ridge that cast deep shadows over the eyes in the LED lights. But the eyes were what got him. Big, deep brown. Not black, not that solid obsidian color you see in a bear's eyes. Brown, with visible irises. Close set, narrow, but aware. Jim had looked into a lot of eyes in his law enforcement career. You learn to read people through their eyes. Fear, aggression, intoxication, deception. You see it all there. What he saw in this creature's eyes was, it was processing, thinking, trying to figure him out the same way he was trying to figure it out. The nose was wide and flat, like a gorilla's, but more pronounced. The kind of nose that samples the air, that can detect scents from incredible distances. The nostrils were large, slightly flared. The skin on the face, where there wasn't hair, looked like black Italian leather. That's the only way Jim could describe it. Textured, not smooth like human skin, not covered in fine hair like a chimp, just leather-like, weathered. And the hair that framed the face was dark, matted, thick. Not fur, hair. Like human hair, but coarser, longer, wild. They stood there in mutual stillness, man and creature, separated by less than the length of a car, both of them frozen in this impossible moment. What struck Jim most, what he still can't shake, was the expression on its face. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't baring teeth or growling, wasn't displaying threat behavior. If anything, it looked friendly, almost innocent. Jim struggled to find the right words to describe it. The best he could come up with was this. It looked like a person with Down syndrome who was happy to see you. Not meaning that as any kind of insult, but that kind of open, guileless curiosity. That genuine interest without any malice or agenda. Like a child discovering something new and fascinating. The creature was looking at him, but also past him, taking in the truck, the lights, the refrigeration unit. Its head tilted slightly, the way a dog tilts its head when trying to understand a sound. Processing. Cataloging. Jim realized it was trying to figure out what he was doing. What was this vehicle? Why was this human here? What was all this machinery? What was making that humming sound from the refrigeration unit? It was curious. Genuinely curious. Not threatened, not hunting, just interested. And that, in some ways, was more unnerving than if it had been aggressive. Because aggression, Jim understood. Predatory behavior he'd been trained for, that follows rules, patterns. You can predict it, respond to it. But curiosity, intelligence, a creature that's choosing to observe rather than attack, that's making decisions, assessing, thinking, that was something else entirely. Jim's mind was racing through options. Should he move? Should he say something? Should he back away slowly? His hand was near his side box where he kept a firearm, legal for truck drivers in most states. But the thought of pulling a weapon on something that wasn't displaying aggression felt wrong. And even if he did, what would that accomplish? At this distance? Against something that size? So Jim did the only thing that made sense. Nothing. He stood perfectly still, maintained eye contact, tried to broadcast through his body language that he wasn't a threat. The creature's nostrils flared again. It was smelling him, smelling the truck, smelling the cargo. And that's when Jim realized something. This thing could smell what he was hauling. They stood there for what felt like an eternity, probably 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Time gets weird in moments like that. Jim's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His breath was coming fast, adrenaline making every sense hyper-acute. He could see every detail of the creature's face, could hear the sound of its breathing, could smell that musky odor mixed with the diesel exhaust and the cold Indiana air. The creature hadn't moved, still just standing there, observing. One massive hand resting on the trailer frame, fingers easily 10 inches long, covered in coarse, dark hair. Jim started to think maybe this was going to be okay. Maybe the creature would just look its fill and leave. Maybe they could both walk away from this. And then the refrigeration unit kicked on. The refrigeration unit on a semi-trailer runs on its own diesel engine. When the compressor cycles on, the engine fires up with zero warning. It's loud. A sudden mechanical roar that shatters silence like a gunshot. Both of them startled. Hard. Jim jumped, stumbled backward, lost a shoe as his foot caught on the frame rail. The creature reared back, startled by the sudden noise, and slapped the refrigeration unit. Not a gentle tap. Not a swat like you'd brush away a fly. A full-force, open-handed strike that shattered the glass panel on the front of the unit. The sound of breaking glass echoed across that empty Indiana farmland. Sharp, loud, final. Jim watched in stunned slow motion as the creature's hand connected with the metal housing, as the polycarbonate panel exploded into fragments, as the creature's arm followed through with enough force that the entire trailer rocked on its suspension. And then the creature ran. Jim could feel it running. Every time its foot hit the ground, the earth trembled. A deep, rhythmic percussion like someone dropping sandbags from a height. Thud, thud, thud. Each impact heavier than should be possible for something moving that fast. It disappeared into the darkness of the cornfield in seconds. Just gone, like it had never been there at all. Jim stood there, breathing hard, one shoe on, one shoe off, staring at the broken glass scattered across the gravel, the shattered panel on his refrigeration unit, the darkness where the creature had vanished. His hands were shaking. His legs felt weak. That hollow, sick feeling in his stomach that comes after adrenaline dump. He looked down at his lost shoe, looked at the refrigeration unit, looked at the empty darkness. And then he did what any rational person would do. He got in the truck, didn't close his side box, didn't turn off the work lights, didn't even grab his shoe. Just fired up the engine and drove. Didn't stop until he was on the opposite side of Chicago, parked in a well-lit truck stop with 100 other trucks, surrounded by fluorescent lights and humanity and the comforting sounds of civilization. Only then did his hands stop shaking. Jim sat in that truck stop for 3 hours. Didn't sleep. Couldn't. Just sat in his cab with the doors locked, lights on, trying to process what had just happened. His mother was the first person he called. It was 5 a.m. her time. She answered on the second ring. Mothers always know when it's important. Jim told her everything. The smell, the breathing, the face, the eyes, the glass shattering, the run. Told her in a rush of words, barely pausing for breath. She listened, didn't interrupt. And when he was finished, she said something that stayed with him. "You were never in danger. It was just curious. You startled each other." Maybe she was right. Maybe that's what it was. A mutual encounter, neither party expecting the other, both startled by the sudden noise, both reacting on instinct. But Jim couldn't shake one thought. That thing chose not to hurt him. At 3 feet away, with the speed and strength it displayed when it ran, it could have grabbed him in a fraction of a second, could have snapped his neck, could have torn him apart. It chose not to. That was almost more unsettling than the encounter itself, because choice implies intelligence, implies maturus. Now decision-making implies awareness of consequences. What was Jim looking at? What was that thing? After Jim got home, after he'd had a few days to calm down and think clearly, he and his mother started trying to piece together what had happened. Specifically, why had it approached? Jim's encounter on that Oklahoma back road made sense in hindsight. He was in the creature's territory. He'd pulled over in a dark, isolated area. The creature was probably investigating the intrusion, maybe trying to encourage him to leave. The bump, the scream, classic territorial behavior. But Indiana was different. The creature had approached the truck, walked right up to it while Jim was standing there. That suggested something other than territoriality. Jim thought back to the moments before he turned on the work lights. The smell he'd noticed, the musky, skunky odor. That was the creature. But there was something else. The creature had been sniffing. Its nostrils had been flared, sampling the air. Not trying to smell Jim, or not just trying to smell Jim. Trying to smell the cargo. And that's when Jim remembered what he'd been hauling that night. Rice Krispies treats. An entire refrigerated trailer, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, packed with pallets of marshmallow treats bound for a grocery store chain in Chicago. And here's the thing about refrigerated trailers. They're vented. They have to be. Certain produce gives off gases during transport. Ethylene from fruits, carbon dioxide from vegetables. If those gases build up in an enclosed space, they can reach toxic levels, even explosive levels. So refrigerated trailers have ventilation systems. Air circulates, which means so do smells. Jim's trailer that night was pumping out the smell of marshmallow into the Indiana darkness. For miles around, if the wind was right, anything with a functioning nose could smell it. Jim and his mother talked through the theory, and it made sense. More sense than either of them wanted. Think about it from a biological perspective. Every creature on this planet is hardwired to seek out sugar. Because sugar means calories. Calories mean energy. Energy means survival. Bears will tear apart a campsite for a candy bar. Raccoons will rip open garbage bags for moldy pastries. Ants will carry sugar granules 10 times their body weight back to the colony. It's not learned behavior. It's instinct. If these creatures, whatever they are living in the wilderness, calories are everything. They're burning huge amounts of energy just existing. A 7-foot-tall, 600-pound creature needs to consume massive amounts of food just to maintain body weight. So if you're one of these creatures, and you suddenly smell an overwhelming aroma of marshmallow, what are you going to do? You investigate. Maybe it's seen trucks before. Maybe it's learned that these big rolling things sometimes carry food. Maybe it's scavenged from rest areas or truck stops, learned that human activity means potential calories. It wasn't trying to hurt Jim, wasn't being aggressive. It was thinking with its stomach. And that level of practical intelligence, that ability to associate vehicles with food, to investigate rather than attack, to learn, that's what kept Jim up at night. Because animals follow instinct. These things make decisions. So what does Jim think they are? He's thought about it a lot. Listened to hundreds of encounters since his mother introduced him to the subject. Read the theories. Considered the evidence. His conclusion? They're animals. But not just animals. Some kind of relict hominid, evolutionary cousin, great ape, primate, descended from something that branched off from the human family tree hundreds of thousands of years ago and went a different direction. They're intelligent, not human level maybe, but far beyond any known ape. They understand cause and effect. They learn, they plan, they communicate with each other. Jim's seen enough in his life to know that nature is weirder than we give it credit for. Deep ocean creatures that look like aliens. Species discovered every year in remote jungles. Animals with abilities we're still trying to understand. Why not a North American primate? Why not something that evolved to avoid humans, to stay hidden, to exist in the margins we don't pay attention to? The fossil record is incomplete. There are gaps, branches we haven't found yet. Maybe Gigantopithecus didn't go extinct. Maybe it crossed the Bering Land Bridge and adapted to North American forests. Maybe we've been sharing the continent with them all along and just didn't notice, or didn't want to notice. Jim's not a scientist. He can't prove any of this, but he knows what he saw, and what he saw was real. The encounters changed Jim, changed how he operates as a driver. He won't park in rest areas anymore, won't pull over on dark roads unless it's absolutely necessary. Mechanical breakdown, medical emergency, police pulling him over. If it can wait, it waits. When he does need to park for the night, he chooses truck stops, well-lit ones. Flying J, Pilot, Loves. The big chain stops with sodium vapor lights that turn night into artificial day. Places with security cameras and other drivers and the comforting hum of diesel engines idling. And even then, he doesn't park on the edges. Not near the tree line. Not in the back corner by the dumpsters where the lighting is poor. He parks in the middle of the lot, surrounded by other trucks. Maximum visibility, maximum witness potential. His fellow drivers think he's paranoid. They joke about it on the CB radio. There's Jim parked under the damn spotlight again. Let them joke. Jim knows what's out there. He keeps his doors locked now, always. Even in daylight, even at truck stops, even when he's just stepping out to fuel up or grab food. He doesn't take walks in the darkness anymore. Doesn't stretch his legs on quiet exit ramps. Doesn't investigate strange sounds. Because once you've been that close, once you've looked into those eyes and felt the ground shake when it runs away, you don't forget, and you don't take chances. Jim wants you to know something. Especially if you're a truck driver, or anyone who works nights, or anyone who finds themselves on dark roads. If you pull over and something doesn't feel right, trust that feeling. Don't investigate. Don't try to figure out what's making that sound in the woods. Don't walk toward the tree line with your flashlight, thinking you're going to solve the mystery. Get back in your vehicle, lock the doors, and drive. Jim ignored that feeling once in Oklahoma. Got back in his truck, sure, but not before getting bumped and screamed at. He was lucky. In Indiana, he didn't have warning. The encounter found him. But he had witnesses after the fact. The shattered glass on his refrigeration unit, the photos he took of the damage, the repair invoice from the dealership in Chicago. Physical evidence that something had happened. Most drivers aren't that lucky. Most encounters don't leave evidence, just memories. Just that hollow feeling in your chest that makes you park in well-lit areas for the rest of your career. These things are out there. They're not just in national forests or remote mountain ranges. They're on the margins of our world. The tree lines behind truck stops, the woods beside exit ramps, the forgotten spaces between civilization's bright spots. And they're aware of us. Jim's encounters aren't unique. They're not even rare. Other drivers have similar stories. Rest area encounters, creatures walking across highways, massive figures glimpsed in headlights. Most don't report them. Most stay quiet because they don't want to be ridiculed, don't want to lose their jobs, don't want to be known as that crazy driver who saw Bigfoot. But the stories are there if you look for them. Jim's story raises questions that don't have easy answers. If these creatures are intelligent enough to investigate vehicles, curious enough to approach without hostility, adaptable enough to exist on the margins of human civilization, then where else are they? How many truck stops have they watched from the tree line? How many rest areas? How many exit ramps in the middle of nowhere, where a lone driver pulls over at 2 a.m. and doesn't notice the eyes watching from the darkness? Jim was lucky. Both times the encounters ended without violence. The first creature bumped his truck and screamed, but it let him drive away. The second creature could have grabbed him at 3 feet but chose to watch instead. Not every encounter is aggressive. Not every witness reports hostility. Sometimes, they're just curious. But curiosity from something that size, with that strength, with that intelligence, that's a different kind of danger. The danger of the unknown. The danger of something that's making decisions about whether to reveal itself or stay hidden. And most of the time, it chooses to stay hidden. Jim wants you to remember something. If you're out there on a dark road and something doesn't feel right, trust that feeling. Don't investigate. Don't try to figure out what's making that sound in the woods. Get back in your vehicle, lock the doors, and drive. Because some mysteries are better left unsolved. Make sure to like and subscribe.